Welcome to the second episode of the After Sessions. Phineas Gage, the man with a hole in his head.
There's a photograph that historians, psychologists, and even neuroscientists keep coming back to. A man standing stiffly, one hand on his hip, the other holding a long iron rod. What the picture doesn't show is what's missing: a chunk of his frontal lobe, the very part of the brain that shapes who we are. Before doctors could even map the mind, one man was already living without a part of it.
A spark, a miscalculation, and an explosion sent a 3-foot iron rod straight through his skull. It should have killed him instantly. Instead, he stood up, he spoke, he lived. Phineas Gage was an ordinary man struck by an accident that sparked an unimaginable number of theories.
Survival wasn't the miracle, the aftermath was. Gage returned as a stranger, unrecognizable to the people who once trusted him. His case challenged everything science thought it knew. Because what happens when there's literally a hole in your head?
Phineas P. Gage was born in 1823 in the quiet fields of New Hampshire, where life was simple and expectations were steady. He grew up the way many young men did then, tending to farm chores, learning patience, responsibility, and the kind of discipline that doesn't come from rules, but from daily life. People who knew him never used dramatic words, but their descriptions were consistent: bright eyes, quick mind, dependable hands. He was the sort of man whose strength didn't need announcing.
And that quiet strength carried him far. By his mid-20s, he wasn't just part of a railroad crew. He was leading one. Being a foreman back then was more than a job. It was a test of judgment. You had to plan blasts, manage men, keep tempers calm, and make decisions that could mean life or death. In today's psychological language, Phineas showed high executive functioning long before anyone knew what that meant. He was structured, organized, self-controlled, the classic traits of what we now call conscientiousness.
Which is exactly why his story feels so heavy. He wasn't reckless or volatile, or the kind of man you'd expect to fall apart. He was the stable center of a dangerous world, the person others trusted to keep them safe. And that's what makes understanding his early life so important. It gives us a picture of the man before the explosion, the baseline that shows just how sharply the arc of his life would bend. And that's what makes understanding his early life so important. It also shows how self aware he was, something that becomes important when we later ask whether he realized the change in himself.
September 13th, 1848, the day everything changed. Among Gage's duties was to clear rocks to level the ground, but he made a tiny mistake that ended up changing the course of his entire life. Gage tamped down the powder with his stamping rod without the addition of the sand, which was used to prevent contact between the rod and the powder. As his stamping rod, which was about 1 meter long, struck against the side of the rock, it ignited the gunpowder. The explosion caused the 6 kg rod to enter Gage's head through his left cheek, behind his eye, up through the skull, and out the top of his head. The rod landed almost 82 feet behind him. And here's the question everyone still has: how did he survive something like this? The rod missed his brain stem and major arteries like the cavernous sinus, the two things that would have killed him instantly. That's why he didn't bleed out on the spot.
Doctors expected a corpse, but instead they got a miracle. Gage didn't just survive. He walked to a nearby cart fully conscious so he could be taken into town to be seen by a doctor. He was still conscious later that evening and able to recount the names of his co-workers. Gage even suggested that he didn't wish to see his friends since he would be back to work in a day or two anyway. And bizarrely, the fact that the rod created a clean pathway in and out and left the wound open actually helped him.
The injury created a hole in his head that allowed blood and other fluids to drain, which relieved the immense pressure that could have built up in the skull and caused further damage. His physician was able to clean the wound, remove bone fragments, and even replace large pieces of bone. He also intentionally left the wound partially open with adhesive straps and loose bandage to allow for continued drainage. That open drainage method, though crude, reduced pressure and infection. Medically, that's a huge part of how he survived.
About 10 days later, however, he endured a brief period in which he was barely conscious. His doctors anticipated his death. But Gage quickly recovered, and within a matter of months, he regained his physical strength and was able to return to work. He sustained no motor or speech impairments, and his memory remained intact. After a few months, Dr. John Martin Harlow noted that while Gage had lost vision in his eye and was left with obvious scars from the accident, he was in good physical health and appeared recovered.
But what survived physically didn't survive psychologically. Gage's friends said he was no longer the man they knew. Before the accident, he had been their most capable and efficient foreman, one with a well-balanced mind and who was looked on as a shrewd, smart businessman. He was now, Harlow said, fitful, irreverent, and grossly profane, showing little deference for his fellows. He was also impatient and obstinate, yet capricious and vacillating, unable to settle on any of the plans he devised for future actions. His friends said he was no longer Gage. People often wonder, did Gage himself know he had changed? Most likely only partially. The part of his frontal lobe responsible for insight and impulse control was damaged, meaning he could feel frustration but couldn't fully recognize or manage his altered behavior.
In Freudian terms, it was like his superego, the inner moral compass, had been damaged, leaving the instinct-driven part of his brain unfiltered. While Freud wrote decades later, his theory oddly fits. The part of Gage that managed impulses was literally gone. And yes, this is exactly why people now associate personality with frontal lobe. Gage's case became the first major evidence that damage in this region alters decision making, morality, and emotional regulation.
Neurologist Antonio Damasio later studied Gage and revealed that the accident destroyed part of his frontal lobe, disrupting his ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the region tied to decision making, impulse control, emotional regulation, and social behavior. This supported Damasio's somatic marker hypothesis, which states that emotions are crucial for rational thought. It wasn't that Gage became bad, his brain's emotional circuitry had been rewired. He was forced to rebuild his identity with the pieces he has left. Some researchers even think he may have had PTSD. Emotional numbing, irritability, and difficulty connecting with others could have come from trauma layered on top of neurological damage.
After the explosion turned him into a living medical question, Gage drifted through the world like someone trying to outrun his own brain. Chops slipped through his fingers. The dependability he once wore like an armor was gone, replaced by impulses he couldn't always control. In a century that had no language for mental health, Gage wasn't injured, he was inconvenient. So he kept moving. Stables, odd labor, even a brief stint traveling with a circus, holding up that iron rod like a relic from a life he barely recognized. People often asked, why did he actually improve in Chile? Because the routine of stagecoach driving pushed his brain to form new pathways, early neuroplasticity at work. The structure and repetition helped rebuild some of the executive functions he lost.
But the story isn't just tragedy. In Chile, something unexpected happened. Driving stagecoaches through the Andes, he followed strict routines, managed teams of horses, and interacted with passengers. And strangely, he stabilized. Some researchers think his brain began rewiring itself, quietly repairing pathways that the rod had destroyed, long before neuroplasticity even had a name. It's possible he wasn't just surviving anymore. He was slowly reassembling parts of his life that everyone thought he had lost. Still, the brain never fully healed. That's why, 12 years later, the seizures began, almost certainly due to scar tissue and lingering damage from the original trauma.
By 1860, the seizures arrived, like echoes of the explosion that had torn through him years earlier. This time, there was no miraculous recovery. Gage died at 36, not with a bang, but in a quiet California home, surrounded by family who had watched him change, fall apart, and piece himself back together again. His skull was later exhumed, the iron rod placed beside it, and both sit today at Harvard's Warren Anatomical Museum.
His personality changes cracked open questions about where decision-making, impulse control, morality, and identity really live in the brain. His case inspired the earliest theories about the frontal lobe shaping who we are, pushed scientists to think about localization of function, and lit the first spark of what would become neuropsychology.
Before brain scans, before neuroscience, before psychology even dared call itself a science, there was a man standing with a hole in his head, proving that the mind could break, and that studying those breaks might finally help us understand how personality, memory, and behavior are built. And if he lived today, modern neurosurgery, antibiotics, and long term rehab would have likely allowed far more recovery. His personality changes might still happen, but many of them would be reversible or even manageable with treatment. Who knows, he might have lived longer today.
Phineas Gage didn't have a crown, a palace, or a famous title, but he changed history in his own quiet, accidental way. His story proved that the brain isn't just an organ, it's the seat of personality, behavior, and identity.
His life forces us to ask, what makes us who we are? Are we the sum of our memories, our temperament, our brain chemistry? And what happens when one piece is suddenly torn away?
Gage may have lost part of his brain, but he gave science the key to understanding the human self. And in the after sessions,
That is enough to deserve one last session.